you won't do any sport at all, will you? And I said, well, actually, I said, I do a little bit of cycling. He said, oh, eyebrows went up to the ceiling sort of thing. Oh, he said, well, he said, take it very steady. He said, do you get out of breath at all? I said, well, occasionally. He said, well, if the hills get too hard, he says, you must get off and walk. He says, I'm sure the boys will wait for you.
Cycling history is full of great heroes. There's people like Rick Van Looy, the fantastic Belgian sprinter roadman, like Gimondi, the Italian champion, like Eddie Merckx, of course, and Fausto Coppi. But to me, the greatest hero of them all is not a hero at all. She's a heroine. Her name was Beryl Burton.
Come on, Beryl. Come on, Beryl.
So here's a close-up of the Queen of British time trialling on her way home. Come along, Beryl.
Yes, the Queen of British time trialling. Beryl Burton certainly was that. She reigned supreme in the sport from her first championship victory in 1958 to a final one in 1986. One of Britain's cycling's champion of champions, Beryl Burton won the Women's BBAR, the British Best All-Rounder title, an incredible 25 years in a row between 1959 and 1983. Through sheer force of will, she became arguably the greatest woman cyclist ever, and yet she only did it part-time and she remained an amateur throughout her life. As well as time trialling, Beryl excelled on the track and on the road. On the track in the 3,000-metre pursuit, Beryl Burton was world champion 5 times. In road racing, she was world champion twice, second once and a national champion no fewer than 12. So, 7 World Cycling Championship titles, more than 90 domestic championships and numerous national records, all achieved by a working housewife and an amateur rider. Given her lack of financial backing, expert coaching or any guidance on sports science and diet in a sport that makes relentless demands on the mind and physique, her achievements are more than remarkable. They're simply amazing. One could argue that they are the most continuous record of individual victories in cycling history. Indeed, perhaps in any sport.
Did all my singing that roundabout really? I don't think I've any voice left. Reggie's just said how long am I going to go on. I said, while we start present beautiful bouquets of flowers like this, they're absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Very nice to see so many people out here today. We know you've all come to see the ladies, not the men's event first. Thank you everyone for their encouragement going around the course. It's nice to see a lot of people around the course interested in what you're doing, whether you're struggling or not. All shouts of encouragement are welcome. Congratulations to the organisers. The marshalling and everything was superb. Except the ones that tried to stop me here when I had no choice but to go straight on.
Beryl Burton dominated women's cycling in the UK for over 2 decades. But like most born in Yorkshire in the north of England, she had no airs and graces. She would happily mix with spectators and competitors before and after a race, as we see here when she fooled around with daughter Denise, who later became the British National Road Champion in her own right. Between racing and training and looking after her home, Beryl worked part-time at the local fruit farms.
We used to run evening time trials on the Wakefield-Bradford Road, and the driver used to say to me, you want to ride, you know, on Wednesday night? And I say, oh no, I'm not really fast enough, I'm not good enough to ride. To race, not to race. Oh, you'll do well. And I started riding the evening 10s, as we called them then. They were 10-mile time trials. I think for the first one I did something like about 33 minutes, which is terribly slow, so I wasn't a natural to start with, as everybody thinks. Because it's always the same with sport, and in other sports, people, if you get a name, people only get to know your name as you get to the top, and they think that you've become a natural. They don't realise that you've spent years and years getting there from nothing.
I'll tell you what, once having got there, you've stayed there, haven't you?
Yes, I'd certainly got the bit between my teeth.
From those early evening tens with her Morley Cycling Club teammates, Beryl rapidly progressed to riding longer, more demanding races. The 25-mile individual time trial, the 50-mile, and later the even more demanding 100-mile individual time trial. Climbing onto the podium to collect the winner's bouquet was to become second nature for this legendary champion. Where do Beryl's achievements rate in British cycling history? Well-known journalist Roger St. Pierre has his own personal view.
There's a lot of debate these days about who is or was the greatest British cyclist ever. A lot of people would say it's Mark Cavendish. Go back through the records and there's Tom Simpson. And of course the great Reg Harris, who was multiple world sprint champion. But actually, for my money, there was one cyclist who eclipsed all of them. And yes, it wasn't a man, it was a lady. Her name was Beryl Burton. She was just superb. Anybody who could win the same championship title 25 times in a row has got to be remarkable. Now, I know you could argue that there wasn't a great depth of competition, but that's quite a remarkable achievement, unmatched in any sport. And she didn't just win 25 national BAR championships, she was 7 times a world champion as well. And she won championships at every discipline you can almost imagine. She was a great road rider, she was a great time trialist, she was a brilliant track rider. But also Beryl was a club girl. She grew up in the traditional cycling circles where the club life was everything. And she'd go out on the club runs and she would go touring. She'd use her bike to go to work in the fields where she grew rhubarb. She was a remarkable lady. I've never come across anybody with quite so much determination, apart from perhaps Tom Simpson, who was, of course, so determined that it proved his undoing.
When I was 12, well, 11, yes, I was in hospital a couple of years. I was in hospital 9 months, actually. I was away from school 2 years. And I was one of those children that enjoyed school. I really did. And I used to hate holidays. I really enjoyed school. And I had a nervous breakdown. Well, I had a child complaint caught chorea, which is a nervous breakdown, St. Vitus, dancers, rheumatics altogether. It's got caught chorea. I was in St. James's 9 months. I always remember when I came out because the doctor said I had to take it very, very steady.
12th of May 1937, Halton, Leeds, West Yorkshire. Beryl Burton was born into an ordinary working class family to John and Jessie Charnock. She was the second of 3 children. Elder sister Maureen and younger brother Geoffrey recall their childhood days.
We lived in Everley Road, which is a suburb of Leeds, but our main recollection would be at Dorset Terrace, off Harehouse Lane, a suburb of Leeds. Then from there, we actually, if you like, spent some time living with our grandmother, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Which was over in Armley, which is the west side, over this side of Leeds. That was the time when Beryl took ill, wasn't it?
Yes.
She contracted rheumatic fever, which in those days was quite an illness. Obviously not treatable as easily as it is today. She was in hospital for well over 12 months.
Yes, she was.
Well over 12 months, wasn't she?
The severe illness did affect her education, and so she left school at only 15, managing to get office work at the local tailoring company Montague Burton. It was here that she met Charlie Burton, a keen cyclist and a member of the nearby Morley Cycling Club. Also a Morley Cycling Club member at this time was Peter Jackson. As well as enjoying cycling with his brother Tony, they were keen amateur cine film enthusiasts. And he remembers filming the club out on their early Sunday morning runs up to the Yorkshire Dales.
That was our wheel with a clubman, we called it, and we set off from Leeds, went up the Dales, and Beryl was with us, and then we rode to what they called Strines, where we had the hill climb. Of course, Beryl didn't ride in the hill climb because it was men only, and we had the hill climb, and then we came home.
Charlie Burton remembers taking Beryl out with the club on those early Sunday morning runs.
When she actually came out with the club,
because that was early on. The first year she was being pushed and hanging around behind us, and then the next year she was riding with us, and by the third year she was at the front and leaving us.
We had a talk about doing some filming, and we went to buy a camera. It was hellish expensive, so what we did was we shared the expense of the camera. And then of course when we'd taken 1 or 2 films, we wanted to see them, so we had to go and buy a projector, and we called ourselves Morley Cycling Club Film Unit. We learned as we went along, and we experimented a little lot, but we couldn't afford to waste film. Too expensive.
Big Dave will weld his hands out while she wound the wool up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, she always had a knitting with her at one time. Didn't
Yeah,
she?
yeah.
I don't think she ever knit while she rode.
With encouragement from Charlie, Beryl had now found something she both enjoyed and was to become very good at. The Yorkshire air and cycling over the dales proved conducive to romance, and in 1955, at just 17 years of age, Beryl married Charlie at St John's Church, Moortown, Leeds. Their married life together started in a small one-up, one down in the town of Morley, just outside Leeds, and so it began. Beryl Burton's connection with Morley, where she lived throughout most of her adult life. Morley is a market town on the outskirts of Leeds in West Yorkshire, England. Money from the cloth industry saw many fine buildings erected in Morley, including the town hall with its impressive columns and bell tower, and now a Grade 1 listed building. Beryl is one of the town's most well-known figures, and to many she will always be known affectionately as the daughter of Morley. Cycling achievements are honoured by the town in a number of ways. A special plaque in the town hall. A decorative children's tapestry in the town hall details the famous people from Morley, including, as we see here, Beryl on her bike, and this handcrafted artwork also celebrates the region's rhubarb heritage, of which Beryl, who worked on the local farms, was so much a part of. There is a Beryl Burton commemorative gardens and Marblestone. There is a special cycleway in her name, which enables local cyclists to travel between Harrogate and Knaresborough without using the busy A roads. And there is an artwork painted directly on a wall in the centre of Morley, which perfectly captures the spirit of this remarkable woman. A beautiful mural, a wonderful piece of art which shows the 7-time world champion in action. Part of the Beryl Burton Gardens, this mural was officially opened in 1998, 2 years after she died. 60 foot by 15 in size, the mural was designed by Les Packham and was selected by Charlie and 2 members of the Beryl Burton Memorial Fund from a selection of designs. The memory of this Morley cyclist lives on in this huge work of art. Look closely and one can see the distinguishing characteristic of this mural painting, particularly the architecture of the town hall and bell tower, which are harmoniously incorporated into the picture. Younger brother Geoffrey remembers Beryl's early married life.
What you have to remember here is that Beryl used to work for NIM, who was an integral part of the cycling fraternity around Morley. And Beryl used to work. I mean, she used to go work for NIM in the rhubarb and what have you.
Yes, she did.
And then go out and do a training in the evening. And she used to be out training, and I can remember many occasions, because if you remember that by this time Mum wasn't so well,
Yeah.
and Beryl used to do a training, and then she used to come over to Moortown and do her mum's ironing.
Yes.
And also stand and watch telly, because we didn't have tellies either, you see. Beryl would never have a television in our house.
She'd come to mine and sit and watch telly. I said, you come to see me and talk to me and I'll watch telly.
In 1956, Beryl and Charlie had a daughter, Denise. Beryl was now a mother as well as a working housewife. Charlie fixed a seat to the back of Beryl's bike and they all resumed club cycling and racing. Denise became a part of the Burton cycling unit. Cycling historian and author of the book 12 Champions, Peter Whitfield, recalls meeting Beryl after she had moved from Morley to nearby Harrogate.
I couldn't claim that I knew Beryl Burton very well. I met her a few times, and once when I was in Harrogate visiting a friend, I knew she lived in Harrogate, I simply telephoned her and said, "Can I come and see you?" I'm a cyclist, and she just said yes. So I went and spent about an hour talking to her. We didn't talk about anything except cycling, and I don't think there was much in her life except cycling, but I got a very strong impression of her. She was very attractive. I suppose at that time she would have been 40, 45 years old. She was very attractive in a tomboyish way, but tough. I think this was the predominant impression I got from her, that she was tough, and there was really no time wasting in her life at all. And I'm told later, I didn't notice this at the time, that she had no television and no telephone and this kind of thing. Afterwards, I started researching her life. This was after she died. When I started writing my cycling books, I researched her life and found out a fair amount about her. Principal thing was that she had serious illness in her childhood. Between the ages of about 11 and 13, she had a near paralysis. She lost 2 years out of her life. She lost all her educational opportunities. And I think this did something to her. It made her determined that she had to prove herself. And she was looking in some unconscious way for something that she could do supremely well in order to prove herself. And she found it in cycling.
I joined the Morley Cycling Club in, I think it'd be probably 1959 or 60. And Beryl then was just starting to take off. I think Charlie met her when she was 17, and he said he spent the first year pushing her, the second year riding with her, and after that he was always trying to keep up with her. Yes. So she hadn't really, when I joined, started winning world titles.
We had a chap who worked for the railway and got permission for us to stand on the bridge and take the film. Well, Ron, wasn't it? Remember? No. We had another camera, he brought his camera, didn't he, to help us out?
Yeah.
At heart, Bella was a club girl cyclist. It was her first real love even before she started winning races, and it remained so for the rest of her life. In this era, club cycling and touring was extremely popular, and early in the morning, a large group of cyclists out on the roads was a common sight. Saddlebags would be packed with sandwiches and flasks of tea. The club cyclists were out for a ride up to the Dales to enjoy the freedom of cycling and the peace and beauty of the English countryside. For many working people, cycling at this time was much more than simply a means of transport. It was a form of escape from the drudgery of the working week. It was an opportunity to get away from the factory floor or the office desk, to get fresh air with fellow cyclists. As well as the Morley club runs and the many individual time trials Beryl was now competing in, she also took part in road races. Each year she would combine a family holiday with Charlie and Denise with the annual Isle of Man Cycling Week, then a well-known cycling festival that attracted competitors from all around the UK, a feature of which was the famous road race, the Ben Macree, or Girl of My Heart. Crossing the sea by ferry, it was an opportunity to have a break from work as well as to compete, continental style, on roads that were closed to all traffic.
When the girls leave the track and go to the road, the town band turns out, and so do thousands of spectators. In recent years, Britain's girls have proved themselves among the best in the world in road racing, claiming world records and world titles, and at Castletown and the Isle of Man they have the best opportunity to display not only their charm, but their brilliance at this tough game. They call it the race Ben Macree, which is Manx for Girl of My Heart, in this island festival. Sheila Holmes captures both the prize and the hearts when she sprints home the winner. Sheila Holmes stands on the victory rostrum with Beryl Burton, Britain's champion of the world, there to applaud her.
That same year, Beryl had become the first woman to win a World Cycling Championship when she won the 3,000 metres individual pursuit, beating the reigning world champion Elsie Jacobs from Luxembourg on the track in the Belgian town of Liège. It was a triumph, a payback for her childhood illness, the rheumatic fever that had caused her to miss so much of school and set back her education. A year later, in 1960, she repeated her world pursuit success. This time in Leipzig, East Germany, where she beat Belgian Marie-Thérèse Naessens. Her winning time? 4 minutes 6.1 seconds, a new world record. Spectators, journalists and the officials in East Germany were amazed that an ordinary British club girl cyclist who rode, not in just about every race going back home, but often rode to them and back as well, could achieve such an impressive victory. More success followed a few days later when in the road race on the formidable 5-mile Sachsenring circuit, she set off on a lone breakaway. She was away for nearly 20 miles. At the finish, winning by over 3.5 minutes ahead of Cels of Belgium and the East German Kleinens. She was now a double world champion, just a few years after taking up the sport seriously and with only husband Charlie for support. The late great British cyclist Tom Simpson, a world champion himself in 1965, celebrates her famous victory with a kiss. Further international success came in later years, and by 1966 on the track she had regained her World 3,000 metres pursuit title. She was now a 5-time World Pursuit champion. At heart, though, Beryl was always a Yorkshire lass, an ordinary club girl cyclist. International success and honours would not go to her head.
I always think she was, when I said she was attractive and tomboyish, she always reminded me of George in The Famous Five. I don't know if people have read The Famous Five, if they remember this girl who had short curly hair and was determined to prove that she was better than the boys at anything she tried to have a go at. That she did everything herself. In those days there was no coaching, no science, no training methodology, no sponsorship. Nothing at all. You just had to find out yourself and you went and did it. And the only thing you learned how to do was to go out on your bike, riding, pounding and pounding the roads, as long and as hard as you could. And the person who did that the longest and the hardest became the champion. And that was her methodology. But she obviously had something inside her, and I suppose you could say it's any champion, that drove her on to do this, that she had to train longer and harder than anybody else. Whether she had some innate physical ability, I doubt, and I don't know, obviously can't prove that, but I doubt it, and I think it was just something in her mind, and it's been seen in the minds of other great time trial champions too, that they just had this ability to push themselves harder than anybody else, and so it was in the mind.
But I think it would have been, if I'd have taken any other sport, I think I would have been the same. I was a very competitive person as a child. Not with anyone, just with myself. If I was playing ball or anything like that, it was a competition. I used to set myself targets to do things, throwing the ball up to the wall when I used to play with two, you used to do it 20 times sort of thing. And if I dropped it at 19, I would get so frustrated, I'd pick the ball up and bite it with anger. And I think that's where the competitiveness is. I think it's bred in you. I don't think it's something that's I don't think it's something that's put into you. I think it's there. It has to be brought out if you are to show any bit of competitiveness. But as far back as I can remember, I had it. And it wasn't with another person, it was just with myself and whatever I was doing. Knitting or playing ball or shaking the rug or anything.
Looking like this.
Yes. It comes out in all forms. It's there.
What made her so special then? I mean, she was driven, without question. You couldn't deflect her from what she wanted to do. To try and tell her something else, if she didn't think that was the way, there was no way you could persuade her to do something else. And I think that's what made her such an outstanding champion. I mean, there's certainly been no British cyclist like her before or since.
Spectators, journalists and the officials in East Germany were amazed that an ordinary British club girl cyclist who rode, not in just about every race going back home, but often rode to them and back as well, could achieve such an impressive victory. How could she do this without any assistance, without any coaching? How could she set new world records when she more than not had to organise and pay for her own travel to and from international cycling events? At heart though, Beryl was always a Yorkshire lass, an ordinary club girl cyclist. International success and honours would not go to her head. She was equally at home competing in a local club event, as we see here, as she takes part in a muddy North of England cyclocross promoted by her own Morley club and filmed by the Jackson brothers.
It was the North of England Cyclocross Championship, and we'd never heard of a ladies' event before. But we had Beryl and we had one or two other members in the club, girls, and we decided that we'd run an event for ladies, or girls. And it seemed to go down a bomb, but of course Beryl charged through as if she'd done it all her life, and no problem. Cross races were absolutely super for photographing. I mean, it was great. People slashing through mud, throwing the bikes over walls, jumping. It was first class. And we dashed around like lunatics all over the course, trying to get different places. And when we finished and we did it all, we missed the prize presentation, so we organised it, filmed it, but missed the prize presentation. We had a different course, which we always did in them days, a shorter course for the ladies than the men. It would have been nice if we'd have had the same course. We could have seen what times and differences in times there were between Beryl and the rest of them. And I'll never forget seeing her coming up that field at winning it. She'd no trouble at all, as if she'd always done it. No, she was a tough lass, no doubt about it.
Here we see Beryl mixing with spectators and competitors before the start of the British National 25-mile Championship in 1966. Beryl had won this event back in 1958 and then in each successive year up to 1965. That year she had a crash just before the start which had affected her, and she was subsequently beaten by one of her big rivals of the time, a fine cyclist in Liverpool's Joan Kershaw. But this year she was in perfect condition, and a supremely confident Beryl won the event in a record time, 59 minutes, 54 seconds. The first woman to better 1 hour in an individual time trial championship event. Beryl went on to win this event every year up until 1983, an incredible record. At this time trialling, or as those on the continent called it, the race of truth, was the backbone of cycle sport in the UK. In fact, it had been for over 100 years, since its cycling early origins, when bunch or mass start racing on the open roads had been banned. So racing against the clock was the only type of competitive cycling allowed on British roads. In this sport, riders of all abilities would start at 1-minute intervals, and most would be happy to beat their previous time or their previous best. It was called the PB. It was a strictly amateur sport, and governing cycling body, the RTTC, were very tough regarding any form of publicity or advertising. It was simply not allowed. As well as individual riding for themselves, cyclists would also ride for their local cycling club, and this is still the case today. In this event here, we see the local cycling club, the Liverpool Eagle Road Club, taking an impressive and well-deserved team victory. The Liverpool team had some outstanding riders made up of Kershaw, Kennedy and Ross. The winning time was 3:17 and 50 seconds. Beryl had plenty of competition from around the UK during her time too. Anne Illingworth, Joan Kershaw, Wyn Maddock, Anne Horswell, June Pitchford, to name a few.
Oh, she was very encouraging. Yeah, she was. I mean, she wanted people to come along. She still wanted to win. My mother was a very, I'm a #1 person. There's no doubt about it. But likewise, she still wanted up-and-coming riders to do well. So yeah, she was very encouraging and supportive of them. Yeah.
Ever since Denise was born, cycling had been part of her life. How could it not be with a mother such as Beryl Burton? So Denise grew up on a bike. In the early years it was mainly in the back on a seat on her mum's bicycle. Later on, as a youngster and encouraged by Charlie and Beryl, Denise began to ride in some of the local events. And in her early teens she had gained enough confidence and experience to ride in races that even her mother was competing in. Here we see Denise in the colours of her local club, the Morley, at the start of the 1970 25 miles national championship. A young Denise Burton had an uncanny resemblance to her champion mother Beryl when riding the bike competitively. A fellow competitor of Beryl's at the time was a lady called Anne Illingworth. Although she rode for the Hainault Club in Essex, which was way down in the south of England, she became close to Beryl and has vivid memories of the time they spent together.
Very friendly lady. I always found her very amiable. You tend to help each other really, because you can't really afford bed and breakfast and digs, so she's going to ride on the E3, so we'd invite her to stay here, and which was convenient to the both of us, and spend very pleasurable time in my front room. Very easy company she was. And then we'd sit and chat or watch television. Beryl would be knitting, and then we'd go to bed and up at the crack of dawn. We were really true amateurs in those days. It was £3 and a medal, first prize, you know. Amazing, really. We didn't think about it. You just didn't think about it, what the financial gain. We weren't there for that. We were just pure amateurs, really. Worked all day and raced in the weekends.
Yeah, very amateur. For a long, long time, even when I started riding, racing, you paid for your own things. It was very, very amateur. You had to be so careful in those days not to appear as though you'd received anything, or whether it's money or bikes or anything really. You'd got to be very, very careful, and you paid for. Sometimes you had to pay towards your own way. Like my dad went a lot of times with it, well, always to the World Championships, and he paid his own way. Yeah, yeah.
Here we are in the National 100-mile Individual Time Trial Championship in 1966. It was in this very event, back in 1957, only 2 years after she was married, before she was 20 years old, where Beryl had won her first ever medal, a silver. Taking part in cycle races nearly every weekend all over the country had now taken over Beryl's life. She trained, she raced. Everything else, her work, her family life, came second to racing. Racing was her life. Her part-time work in the rhubarb fields kept her active, and in the outdoors, which she enjoyed, but more importantly it allowed her time off whenever she needed to train or race. The Turner brothers had a love of cycling and in particular the sport of time trialling. As keen amateur filmmakers they filmed many events, such as the one we see here, the 1966 100-mile National Championship. And by doing so they were able to capture these magical moments of Beryl in action in her prime. Here we see one of her major rivals, Joan Kershaw, in action. Joan had supported Beryl in the 1960 World Championship road race, but in this race she was doing the chasing. Riders such as Joan and all the other competitors to Beryl must have wondered what they had to do ever to compete with her on equal terms. Such was her dominance. Beryl won the event in a record time of 4 hours 8 minutes and 22 seconds. Beryl won the Road Time Trial Council's British Best All-Rounder competition for 25 consecutive years between 1959 and 1983. In total, she won 72 national individual time trial titles. She won 4 at 10 miles. She won 26 at 25 miles, 24 at 50 miles and 18 over 100 miles. She also set about 50 new national records at 10, 15, 25, 30, 50 and 100 mile distances. Her final 10, 25 and 50 mile records each lasted 20 years before being broken. Her 100 mile record lasted 28 years and her 12-hour record still stands today. At the finish of every event, after the general chat about the day's racing course, weather, etc., it was a time to socialise, to put rivalry to one side and to catch up on the gossip with old friends and teammates. Families would come together to enjoy the atmosphere at the finish. Tea and buns were the order of the day, with children and baby talk a close second.
Rumour has it that you're the leading lady and therefore I think you're going to win, is it £3?
I don't know, I haven't looked. I'll take your word for it.
Beryl's not the only Burton to win prizes. Her daughter Denise, brought up in the saddle, or very nearly, has grown up to be a champion herself. Like mother, like daughter. It must be amazing for you, Charlie, in a way that... I mean, the other week, the 50-mile championship, you know, Beryl Burton wins it, Denise Burton second, the first human beings about 4 minutes back.
Yes, it was really gratifying, because you have to be careful with the children, that if you push them too early and too hard, a lot of them just rebel and don't come in, so it was really nice that we got the family going like that.
Nice to spend most of the time shouting at one another.
Well, I mean, it's good that as well as your legs and your heart and your lungs, she's obviously inherited your competitive instincts as well.
Yes, very competitive, yeah.
They plonked me on a bike as soon as I could ride one. I got taken about in seats and trailers and everything before that. But yeah, it was a matter of if you wanted to go somewhere, you know, to visit a friend or my grandma and stuff like that, I had to go on my bike. So that's how I got into it, really. It's a matter of transport because they were too busy to take me in a car. So it's either bus it or bike it, and I'd rather bike it than bus it, so.
Daughter Denise was fast becoming a promising rider herself, and she rode for the local Morley club, often in support of mum Beryl. At this time, riders for the Morley club rode in a distinctive two-tone blue and white jersey, as we can see here. As we've noticed before, we can see the likeness of Denise and Beryl on the bike, the same high knee action, and the same red cycling shoes. This could be BB chasing up a Minuteman. In this era, riding for a cycling club, it saw very strong friendships made, and this was particularly so for those who rode for the Morley CC.
Well, that's where she started her career with, when she met my dad, and there were the people in it, you know, they stayed friends forever type of thing. Not that they went out of the way to perhaps meet with each other, but they were always there. Oh, remember when so-and-so did this, remember when we did that and things. But yeah, they were lifelong buddies, and some of them, like Nim Carline, very close friend, Malcolm Cowgill, you know, they're all in the Morley there, and even now my dad still sees some of the old Morley people there. Yeah, a real old-fashioned type of club, really.
Beryl is no legend. She's an ordinary Yorkshire lass and a wonderful person. She's part of our family. And Beryl doesn't have a boss. She works for herself. She's not only good at picking raspberries, she's good at also growing them. This is her baby, really, and she looks after it all year round.
Well, why do you do it?
Because I enjoy it. I enjoy being outside.
Yeah.
When I used to work full-time a few years ago on the rhubarb farm, I liked that because that was mainly out, well, winter work as well, but I prefer to be outside. I don't know, I think I've got a bit of gypsy in me, really. I'd stay out 24 hours a day if you allowed me.
Beryl enjoyed working in the fields and sheds of the local fruit and rhubarb farms, like the one owned by fellow Morley club cyclist Nim Carline. A tough, rugged man, Carline was also a very good rider, with impressive victories to his credit, one being the 1962 24-hour championship, where he achieved a colossal 472 miles. Both Beryl and Nim would often go training together after a day on the farm, sometimes putting in hundreds of miles.
The main thing what my mother did is she got in a lot of miles. She trained, you know, training-wise, or just as she called, cycling-wise, she did a lot of miles, more than most men would be doing, actually, because that's what she wanted to do, and that's what worked for her, obviously, as well. It won't work for everybody, I tell you now, not that many miles. I don't know, she was just a strong person though. But I mean, when she was younger, she did have a nervous breakdown and all those illnesses, you know, but somehow she just had this inner strength. And not only the inner strength, she was a strong person. I mean, I think she was about 5'5" or something like that, which is not tall at all, but she did have good sized muscles in the right places. And she was a strong person. She was incredibly powerful. She's compact and powerful. I think that's the saying, isn't it? Yeah.
She was, I know from personal experience, what she said to me when I had that long conversation with her, and I've heard since, that she was contemptuous of other people who didn't have this great drive to excel, this great ambition and this great self-belief. And one of her favourite sayings about people, she would say, they don't know they're alive. This was one of her favourite put-downs when she was trying to indicate that people weren't living properly, they had no determination. They don't know they're alive, she would say.
Yeah, and when you finish all these many miles of training, I'm told, and I want to know if it's true, that for pleasure, you go out for spins on the bike.
Yes, I do. I'm very, very lucky from the point that I can switch off mentally from competition and pleasure riding. And people can't believe me, because sometimes in winter, especially when I've stopped training after a wind down of about 3 weeks after the racing season, I go out on the bike and really I may only be doing about between 1 and 2 miles an hour slower than when I'm training, but mentally I'm switched off completely from competition at all, and I'm just drifting along as far as I'm concerned. And they go, I saw you out last week training. I go, no you didn't, I was just going up to see so-and-so to Catterick or something like that. And I wasn't, and mentally I was switched off completely. But there we are. Maybe it is a natural ability.
Natural ability? What Beryl exemplified was hard work and total dedication, and what could be achieved by this. No woman cyclist had ever ridden under 2 hours over 50 miles. The year 1967 saw Beryl achieve another record. She retained her 50-mile individual time trial title in a time of 1 hour, 59 minutes, 27 seconds. The first time any female cyclist had gone inside 2 hours. It was another milestone. In total, Beryl would win the British 50-mile individual time trial championship an incredible 23 times. In domestic time trial competition, it's safe to say that Beryl Burton was almost unbeatable. As ever, husband Charlie and daughter Denise would be there to support her. In this era, it was family members who supported promising sportsmen and women, and so there could be no doubt that Charlie played a major role in helping Beryl to the top. He was always there at the races to give her the encouragement when she needed it most. At the age of 30, Beryl Burton had reached the top of the cycling world, dominating the sport in the UK and very often abroad as well. Later in the year in Heerlen in Holland, Beryl became World Road Race Champion for the second time, an historic victory, and to cap it all, for Britain's amateur cyclists, Graham Webb won the men's title. It was known as Magic Saturday. In 1968, another first for Beryl, back in the UK, she broke the 4-hour barrier in the National 100-mile Individual Time Trial Championship, the first time by a woman, riding it in a record time of 3 hours, 55 minutes and 5 seconds. She'd smashed the previous year of 1967's time of 4:4:50. As she recalls in her autobiography, Personal Best, in the book, Beryl describes the closing stages of the race. Over the final miles, my wheels were zipping through the wet and I was still feeling good, keeping an eye on the time, forcing myself to urge my legs round, but keeping a rhythm against the top gear. The last 10 miles, 5 miles, and the record was on. Another glance at the watch and I had to blink hard in the rain. There was still a chunk of the 4 hours remaining in which I could pulverise my own record. Straining every muscle, hammering away, and the finish came into sight. Then I am sitting up, the rain in my hair collecting now around my ears and neck. The bike eases down and I shiver in spite of a little coil of steam which traces along my arms. It was a great ride in poor conditions, so great a ride that she had beat the men's time set by John Greatwood by 3 minutes and 23 seconds. And yet that was not enough for Beryl. She thought she could have done even more. As she also recalls in her autobiography, Personal Best, I felt slightly annoyed at myself for not making it a 3:54 and at the weather gods for not giving us a better day. But there it was, the first ride in less than 4 hours by a woman, and not a slender margin at that. Only 3 men in the country had ever covered 100 miles faster than me. In the largely unsung world of women's cycling, Beryl was achieving national recognition. The previous year, Beryl had won an award from the British Sports Writers Association themselves, and she'd been voted Daily Express Sportsman of the Year, Vox Northern Sportsman of the Year, and she became second in the prestigious BBC competition, Sportsview. Yet life was certainly not easy for Beryl. At this time, female cycling in the UK was a very minor sport, rarely reported in the local press, let alone the national press or on television. And as Beryl remained throughout her career a true amateur, she received no financial reward. Hard-won success came out of an ordinary working-class income. In those days there was no sponsorship, no financial backing, no federation or national lottery funding. It was only her part-time work in the fruit farms that funded her unpaid and at times very unglamorous cycling career.
Well, she did a hell of a lot of miles. And of course, at that time we had the best 24-hour and 12-hour ride in the country, Nim Carline. And she worked on his rhubarb farm. And they'd go off after work, you know, piling in miles. And she had a go at the 24-hour. And she put in thousands of miles. Too much, in a way. Charlie said at the time, you know, she was supremely fit, but she would insist on doing more and more miles. And of course, in the event, she was leading it, thrashing everybody in sight, but after 300 and odd miles, her knees gave up and she had to pack. But at the point that she packed, of course, she was leading the field. And of course, Roy Cromack went on to win that event and broke the comp record with over 500 miles. So we shall never know. But that's the way she was. If you couldn't tell her not to do that, she was going to do that.
So yeah, all the 24, yes, that was quite something. I think myself that she'd actually overtrained before it, because she was trying to, you see, Carline was a good 12-hour and 24 man, and she was trying to imitate his riding and training, and I think personally that she overtrained for the 24, because she'd done a brilliant 12 when she'd beaten all the men only just before it. And when she was riding at about 300 miles, she was in front of both. She caught Nim, and she'd also caught Roy Cromack, who was a good lad from the York area. She used to ride it like she rode every other race. She'd start off, and it was eyeballs out until you got to the finish. And that's what she was doing with the 24. She went past all the field and Cromack and Norman and everybody, and then suddenly it all stiffened up, and that was it.
A special medal had been struck, similar to the one awarded to Ray Booty for the first sub-4 hour 100, and there were half a dozen riders seriously interested in writing their names in the record book in that very special way. Among them Eric Matthews, Nim Carline and Roy Cromack, when Beryl herself decided to enter the battle. Carline's 1966 record of 496.3 miles had brought the magic 500 within reach. But in the light of a great 12-hour ride, Beryl had no reason to fear anybody. For the first time in her life, she stopped work for a while that summer and really packed in the miles, training 100 miles a day for weeks on end. She lined up at the start of the Mersey 24 at the end of July, the fittest she had ever been, and she started the race as if she meant to annihilate every other rider, and the record too. She passed the 100-mile mark in 4:11, 150 miles in 6:22, and 200 miles in 8:42. These intermediate times meant that she was on schedule for a total of 540 miles, putting her out on her own, miles ahead of the field. There was amazement and disbelief around the circuit, and Charlie repeatedly urged her to slow down. But what no one except Beryl herself and Charlie knew was that she was in great pain, and that her finishing the race would be a miracle. She had strained both knees in the weeks before the event, and they were hurting before she even turned a pedal. How she managed to ride 340 miles is anyone's guess, but at that point in the race she had to stop. She felt fine in herself, not blown in any way, but the pain in her knees was unbearable, and she knew that to continue was impossible and would risk permanent injury. As she sat forlornly in her car, Roy Cromack, whom she had passed and dropped long ago, swept by and on to his historic victory with a magnificent new record of 507 miles. Without that knee problem, would Beryl have topped 500 miles and beaten Cromack? Looking at the way she was riding, you would have to say yes, but you would also have to say that no sensible person would even have started that particular race. So this ride of Beryl's, one of her very rare failures, shows up certain aspects of her character even more clearly than her innumerable victories. She knew her knees were injured, yet she insisted on competing in the most demanding event in the time trialling calendar. From the start she thrashed away on huge gears, throwing everything into a do-or-die effort. She refused to compromise her style of riding in any way, but had to set a pace that was unprecedented in a 24-hour race for a man or a woman. She had refused to accept defeat until it was forced on her. It was sporting suicide, but she felt she had no choice. She had to commit herself to the utmost. This sums up the psychological problem she boxed herself into. She had to push herself to the limit over and over again under all circumstances, even if it meant flying in the face of reason. To show weakness in any form was unthinkable. She had created a role for herself that had taken over her whole life. She was driven by her own private demons. She'd been at the very top for 10 years. She'd won everything there was to win 10 times over. Any normal person might have felt their ambitions to be fulfilled, might have stepped back and decided it was time for life to move on, but not Beryl. She had found something she could do supremely well, and she saw no reason to stop. The endless hours of training, the effort, the sacrifices, none of this mattered. She could not explain to herself or to others why she must continue. She only sensed that without cycling, her life would be completely empty. She had squeezed everything else but cycling out of her life, and she must continue with it.
And then, a bit further on, for some reason, and I think it was her legs just, she pulled in, she says, I can't go any further. I says, why? She says, my legs won't move. And so we laid her down in the, we had a car with no backing then, an estate, and she laid down in that, and she couldn't move her legs at all. All the veins and muscles in the back of her knees and that were just like wire, and she couldn't, and she was leading then at 300 and odd, and she had to pull out, and Nim, he pulled out not too long after that. But Roy Cromack, he went on to be the first man who beat 500, yes, which was, I felt that it was a bit sad that Beryl was onto that ride but didn't make it in the end.
For most riders, such a setback as she had in the 24-hour where she wanted to break the record would have been devastating, but not for Beryl. She was soon riding again in her Morley CC colours in another race and another win.
It was an intense competition, quite honestly, but having said that, everybody enjoyed it. And what's more, it was old-fashioned by today's riding and everything, because we'd all go down to on the what would it be, one of the Essex roads, and they were fast down there. And they had a big area that was all grass where we all used to meet before we set off, and we'd all talk, and then we'd do the event, and they'd come back, and it was another big jolly talk once again about everything, and what time they'd done, whereas now they seem to get on the train and ride like mad before it's time to set off, whereas they used to go and do the course to see how the wind was, how the road was, how they felt, and they didn't bother getting on any rollers or trainers, and now they do that, and then they come back and they put everything back into the car and they buzz off. So it's not quite as clubby as what it used to be, but it was a wonderful atmosphere before it, and going up the road, you know, because you weren't allowed eventually to run up in cars, because some people were taking advantage of that. But I used to eventually ride up on the bike, which didn't make any difference because I couldn't pace anybody, quite honestly. I was nowhere near fast enough.
Beryl loved competing in races. It was life, but she was also good fun, as we see here at the end of the race, where she enjoys the friendship with her Morley clubmates who won the team prize in the event. Yet another win.
Because she had to try so hard all the time, failure was something completely, weakness and failure was something completely outside her mental horizon. She couldn't ever entertain that. And so she had to push herself and push herself all the time. Well, of course, as you get older, you can't keep on winning races. Her whole life was based around winning bike races. And when she ceased to win bike races, in a way, her life sort of fell apart. She had no identity except winning bike races, and this is what she could not come to terms with. She couldn't ease off, she couldn't stop riding. And I think most people agree that she did train herself, she rode herself to death really, that had she taken it easy, she would not have died in the way that she did at the time that she did, when it's assumed that she collapsed and was found dead at the roadside. She had been ill, she had been seriously ill on and off for quite a number of years, and people did ask her to stop and she wouldn't. So she gave her life to cycling. But in a way it's sad, but in a way, who are we to say that she shouldn't have done it? You know, she did what she wanted to do, she did what she had to do, and she achieved historic feats. And who wouldn't be content with that?
Get that record back.
Yeah, that was her purpose in life, I think. She's a disciplined lady. You can't be that good without being disciplined. It doesn't come easy, and she gave everything for her sport, really. And it is obviously not for gain, because Beryl didn't gain anything, I don't think. I mean, not like nowadays, is it, again? But she deserved more, I think, for the legend she's become.
Beryl was a product of her time. She didn't come from a wealthy family. She came from an ordinary working class family. And in fact, when she and Charlie were married and Denise was a little girl, they didn't have a television, they didn't have a telephone. I mean, it was a very simple existence. But she played her role not just as a great cycling champion, but as a housewife, a mother. And according to Nim Carlin, who she worked for, she was a model employee as well. She was a lady it's hard to fault. She had a nice personality. I met her many times to interview her after races and to watch her race. And she always came across as a very approachable, a typical club girl cyclist. Yet she had that sparkling star quality that people like Reg Harris, Tom Simpson and Mark Cavendish, the same thing. It's not just how they won, it's not just that they won, it's how they won. They all dominated. I can never get out of my mind that most memorable occasion probably in the history of British cycling when she broke the men's 12-hour record, and she overtook Mike Namara, who was actually going to be credited with the men's record, and as she went by she offered him a sweetie. Now she wasn't doing that to be nasty and sarcastic. That was Beryl thinking, well, I've got these sweets, perhaps Mike would like one. That was Beryl all over.
But eventually she got so that she would ride back from, well, even London at times when she was working on the farm later on, because she had more freedom then. And so she'd just jump on a bike and ride the 200 mile back and meet me at home eventually. Quite something.
For Mum, there have been hundreds of great victories, but it's typical of Beryl that she recalls most readily not the big headline wins, but moments that were, well, unusual.
I can't remember the country, but I know I'd gone back to the hotel with the other English girl, and we were just sat down, ready to tuck into a nice piece of steak, our evening meal. And I'd just got my knife and fork into mine, actually, and the team manager came rushing up and says, "Don't eat your dinner, don't eat your dinner. You've got to be on in an hour's time on the track." And they brought all the track forward because we'd had some rain, so they had to alter all the timing of the meeting. So I got him to put this piece of steak in the polythene bag. I wasn't going to miss my meal. And we dashed down to the track with a car with a siren going on the top so that we could get there, because if you didn't arrive in time, that was it. You wouldn't have another chance of riding. And then there's the other times when, there's one in particular, I had an accident on the track training, and I rode the final with my hand strapped onto the handlebars because I'd had to have a painkilling injection in my hand, and I couldn't feel my hand actually gripping, and it used to just fall off, so I had to strap my hand onto the handlebars so that it didn't fall off while I was actually competing.
She was, I reckon, 30 years ahead of her time. The time trialling records that she set in the 1960s lasted until the 1990s. And in the 1990s, they were only broken after the aerodynamic revolution with the disc wheels and the tri-bars and all the rest of it. And to achieve what she did on a simple steel bike, with drop handlebars and, no aerodynamics at all, was just remarkable. And it took a whole generation before the girls in the 90s caught up with her and broke her records.
In this era of Vicky Pendleton and Emma Pooley, Nicole Cook, sponsorship exists. Their jerseys are plastered with adverts for this, that and the other different sponsors. I know the ladies don't get the same level of support that the men get, but they are pretty well funded. Back in Beryl Burton's day, it was pure amateurism. Her jersey and her shorts, as you can see, have no adverts. In fact, there was a stage when the RTTC started threatening to suspend people if the name of their bike brand could be seen in a photograph that appeared in the press. Consequently, there was no great publicity value to sponsors, and there were no sponsors. Of course, people got help in smaller terms. Ron Kitchen was very supportive of Beryl. Raleigh at one stage, I think, gave her some bikes, but generally she had to fund herself. And it often meant riding to events, which is something you very rarely if ever see these days. In fact, Beryl would have been quite used to riding out 50 or 60 miles to a race, competing in the race, and then riding the same 50 or 60 miles back again.
What was she really like at this time, as she approached the age of 40? She was still very attractive, vivacious, warm, approachable, with a lovely big smile, after she had finished her rides. She had hundreds of friends in the cycling world, and she would talk naturally to any other cyclist, old or young, male or female, as though he or she were her equal. But she was also brusque, down to earth, blunt and unimaginative. She never put on any airs or graces, and she never tolerated any in other people. Any fancy talk about art or literature made her turn her nose up. She and Charlie had now moved from Leeds to Harrogate, a much classier place to live, and nearer to the Dales for training. She held various jobs, her favourite being in a bakery shop where she got delicious home-baked bread and cakes. Racking up anything from 200 to 500 miles a week in training, she had a huge appetite and was addicted to rich fruitcakes and puddings. She worked hard, kept her house spotlessly clean and tidy, trained and raced. She had no other interests. She didn't read books, she would not have a television or a telephone in the house, and her only relaxation was knitting. She did enjoy music though, and rather surprisingly she went sometimes to opera performances in Leeds. She liked pieces such as La Bohème and The Merry Widow. She delighted in saving money, and she went to extraordinary lengths to do so. I had the day off work last Friday, she wrote. It was a lovely sunny day and I was going to do all sorts of jobs in the house. And then I thought, blow it, I'm going out on the bike. So I went to Skipton, Grassington, Kettlewell and Buckton over Kidstones. Well, I'd picked up a lovely rabbit, just got its head knocked in, and I thought, lovely, that's tonight's tea, and stuffed it into the saddlebag. I dropped down Bishopsdale, then towards Middleham. Just going up a small rise, a car comes the other way, stops on the brow of a hill. A woman jumps out, mutters something about too late, started running the way I was going. I could see why by now. A pheasant in the road, looked as though they must have just killed it. I gave a quick look back, car on my tail. I thought, blast! Car went by. I did a quick sprint, but she just beat me to it. I said, are you taking it? She said, yeah. So I said, I suppose I shouldn't be greedy. I've already got a rabbit.
Because Keith and I went to all the national championships, and it appeared she was winning all the women's championships, and Keith was presenting her with the caps, which he made for many, many years, of course. We kept in touch quite often. I've got quite a few letters, correspondence from her, and very amusing. Found her very personable and lovely. She stayed with us a couple of occasions, and Charlie, somebody brought her here. Charlie was coming later, and Beryl came and had her meal. She brought her own steak, which she cooked herself. I don't think she trusted my cooking. She was a great lass, oh Beryl. Yes, Keith had, we had an artist working for us, and we were doing some table mats for the best all-rounder, and our artist John drew that picture of her, which is quite good. That's the days with her curly hairstyle. She told us once that she was riding home from work, I think it was, and she was coming to a level crossing, and she looked down the road and she knew that the level crossing was about to close, and she wanted to get her hair cut, so she worked it out that if she put a sprint on and went to the gents' barbers that she was going to pass, that she might be able to fit in her haircut before the gates opened after the train had gone, and she managed it. So she had what she called her boy's haircut then, very short. But so that was the curly style, which I think was natural. Did you hear me on Woman's Hour on Friday? We went out over to Manchester for it. They gave us lunch in the canteen at the BBC studios. What a canteen it was, like a 5-star hotel. The choice of food was out of this world. If I worked there, I certainly wouldn't cook when I got home. And the price, well, I had a big bowl of chicken soup, a roll, 2 butters, then about 3 big slices of roast beef, cottage cheese, pineapple, cooked egg, red cabbage, sliced peppers, chopped celery, apples, nuts and raisins, sliced tomatoes, mash, beetroot, all big helpings. Then apple crumble and half a pint of custard and tea. £1.14. I couldn't believe it.
Here we see a young Denise Burton on a bike. She often rode with her mum, who was useful when it came to changing tyres and mending punctures. Although Charlie and Beryl had encouraged Denise, it was another matter for Denise to become such a good rider and a competitor, and her success led to issues about whether Denise rode in support of her mum and the Morley CC or for herself.
Particularly, no, I think everybody was a rival. I was a rival, a big rival, you know, but nobody in particular. Everybody who was there was a rival.
Beryl had a lot of Yorkshire grit about her. I don't think there was much softness about Beryl. That's my opinion. If Denise would have fallen off of the bike, I don't think she'd have been there hugging her. She'd have probably just chucked her straight back on the bike and said, get on with it, lass. That was what Beryl was about. But hey, you can't take that off of somebody that's won so many world championships, so many time trial titles. You know, if she was here today, she'd be just awesome in her time. You know, she'd be winning everything. I'm sure of that, because she was just one phenomenal lady.
It's a funny feeling. It's a funny feeling beating your mum, for one thing, and it's a funny feeling beating somebody who usually beats everybody else as well.
For Beryl, it was a way of life. That is what she did. She rode bikes, she raced, and she couldn't handle the fact that there were new kids on the block, you know, people coming up and beating her. And I think that probably hurt her a lot as well. Even her own daughter, you know, for her own daughter to beat her, that was tough on Beryl.
For many years, Beryl was very close friends with the famous cycling photographer Bernard Thompson and his wife Ethel, and they would exchange letters on a fairly regular basis. In one of these letters, she relates the following amusing story. After today, I've decided it must be my nose that everyone recognises me by. I was weaving my way through the various sets of traffic lights in York, stopped at one set off again, when a young lad got half a wheel alongside me and muttered, "Excuse me, are you Beryl Burton?" Well, I had on 2 pairs of trousers, 4 sweaters, woolly hat, anorak hood up over that, so my nose was the only thing you could see. I turned to him and said, "Yes," and he said, "Hey, I thought I recognised you."
If it didn't do it, if I wasn't going to win, it wasn't because I hadn't tried, even whatever cropped up. I think that's the main thing in competition. I think when you're in competition, if you're ill or you have an injury or anything, to me, I just compete the same and I do the best under the circumstances. And I feel better. Even if I've been beaten, I've done my best under the circumstances. But I couldn't not go and compete and think, well, I'm not very well or anything like that. It doesn't satisfy me at all.
Having said that, I mean, you've won more than you've been beaten, haven't you?
Yes, there is that. Yes, definitely.
Oh, what do I say about the lady who's won this championship? I think I've got my sums right, but I had to work out the Guinness Book of Records. I won't go through all the records she's won, but I believe this to be the 62nd RTTC championship that has her name on it. There can't be much room left on the cup. Would you like to come forward? Beryl Burton, RTTC, Women's 25-mile National Championship. I should think after 62 you should know how to put them on by now. Very good, well done. Well, thank you very much, all the girls. Great, lovely.
What happened to the year you didn't win it? I'm not sure.
Fine, lovely.
Now we have the presentation to Jill Bishop, who is the junior winner. Well done, Jill.
Sorry, beg your pardon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9. It was Terry Riley that was 12. Made up the team.
I know what my body has to tell me to do a ride. It's strange, you can't explain it. If I drop to about 96 or something like that, I know I've lost it. Yeah.
Poor old souls.
Old Sturgs. Yeah. Smile with you.
Except Beryl. Yeah, but
Just look at the ladies' Palmares. Honoured by the Queen as an OBE, Beryl Burton was World 3,000 metres pursuit champion 5 times, second 3 times, third 4 times. She was national champion. In road racing, she was world champion twice, second once. National champion 12 times, second twice. In time trialling, she won the British Best All-Rounder Ladies Championship for 25 successive years, and then managed to come second in another year. She was 100 miles champion 18 times. She was 50 miles champion 23 times. She was 25 miles champion 25 times. 4 times 10 miles champion. It goes on and on. Now tell me she wasn't the greatest British cyclist of all time.
And she would beat people like Roger Queen. Now, Roger Queen is a giant of a guy, big, powerful guy. And Beryl beat him. I mean, that is unheard of. She'd beat Baz Breeden, who was the 25 champion and competition record holder. Well, that would never happen today. Never.
And about to go is Mandy Jones of the West Pennines.
You knew of her, did you?
Oh yeah, I knew because my dad had raced against her. My dad used to time trial and she was one of his, she used to talk about her all the time, Beryl Burton. Brilliant. So yeah, his generation knew her and he'd raced against her and been beaten by her. So it was great. I wouldn't say because as a teenager you just know her as somebody who races, and it wasn't until I started racing. And I did start time trialling first as a teenager, and obviously you only gradually, as the years go by, start to get better. And I didn't really start road racing until I was 16, and I went then onto gears for the first time because I've been on fixed wheel all my life. And then I gradually got better, and then I started training properly when I was about 17, and then at 18 got selected to go to World Championships. So, and then of course by then I'm then riding with Beryl, but still not beating her in time trials. So even at 18, 19, she was still phenomenally fast and still winning all the national championships BAR. So it wasn't until early 80s really I would have said that I started really beating her. She was really, really competitive. You can't do what she did for so long and not be extremely competitive. And I don't think I'd have liked it if I'd have been her, if somebody was beating me. So no, I don't imagine she did, because she wouldn't have been Beryl if she had enjoyed it, would she?
Saturday events only, and I can quote her and bugger this job.
In the afternoon, the men's amateur championship.
Yeah, when the Worlds were in England in 1982, Goodwood, she expected to be picked because she was still winning, she was still doing good, and she was more or less an ambassador really. She'd been around for quite a while by then, and she should have been picked, and she was upset that she wasn't picked, yeah, definitely.
Hurrah! It's a British Championship, a British triumph. Mandy Jones is going to win.
That was wonderful, wasn't it? I mean, that was fabulous. I'm not saying it made up for it for my mum, but it certainly made up for it. Yeah.
Yes, my first race was in Barnoldswick in Lancashire, and when I turned up there was Beryl Burton on the start line, which my mum and dad, it was a person that they'd grown up and knew about from cycling, and there she was cycling with me. It was quite awe-inspiring at the time. I think no, she beat me. Yeah, she beat me, just pipped me to the line, but it was quite exciting to be in a race with the likes of Beryl Burton.
A phenomenal athlete, I mean, well in front of her time with the training she did and the dedication she had, and an absolute inspiration to other people. Even now when you speak to people who are non-cyclists and you say, can you name a person who's a cyclist, a lot of people can name Beryl Burton, even though she's not raced for years. And it's fantastic what she's actually left us, if you like, and especially as a woman, the inspiration to other women to actually think, if Beryl can do this, then there's a chance for somebody else to do it as well. So she's absolute inspiration, brilliant, yeah.
Do you enjoy winning?
Yes, I do. Not when I'm actually on the bike and I'm striving to win. Not now. I think God, what on earth am I doing here? Why am I doing this? And yet with bits between my teeth and my eyeballs are hanging over the front wheel and I'm really giving it every 100%. And yet I think, why can't I just go home and be like other people and go out for the day in the car up the Dales or something like that?
I mean, you know why you do it, and people that know you know why you do it. But, I mean, a lot of people must say, why does she still do it? I mean, for 25 years you've been the top British lady cyclist and you've won the world titles in all the different phases of the sport. I mean, what is it that keeps you going?
Well, you've got this will to win, this determination to be number one, and you don't know when it will go out. I mean, I may have it for another 20 years.
Why not?
She was a supreme champion, totally dedicated. Probably the best athlete this country has produced at anything, and the like of which we shall probably never see again.
I was very close to a man called Fred Fisher, who absolutely idolised Beryl. He really did. And he rang me to tell me that she died, and he was obviously very upset, as we all were. But it was such a shock to us all, really. I must be honest, I don't recall what she died of, really, or the reasons why. But it's still very sad to be found on the side of the road. And of course it would hit all the newspapers because of Beryl being a legend, really.
I've hardly any need to tell you who this is. Well, you've guessed, it's Beryl on her way up.
Back end of last season and most of this season had one of those little avocets which records what mile per hour you're doing when you're training. And I go along with this avocet on the handlebars and sometimes I'm quite staggered how fast I am going in training, and I think, well, this is nearly racing speed. And yet I'm not using racing gears, I'm just using training gears, and it quite staggers me how fast you can get training. And I've got to the point where I think, well, I'm wondering whether I'm training too fast, to be quite honest.
Maybe she was, as she recognised in her book Personal Best when she talked about her breathing not being good and that she was told that she had a chest infection. She was now using an inhaler before racing, but the medical advice was really that she should not be racing at all. But one can always wonder what would have been for Beryl if women's cycling had been taken more seriously and they could have taken part in the Commonwealth and the Olympic Games. Women's cycling was only introduced with the road races into the Olympic Games in 1984 in Los Angeles. It's a question that fellow Morley CC member and close personal friend Malcolm Cowgill considers.
Who knows what she could have achieved. I mean, I was looking at a photograph the other day taken in the 1967 World Road Championship in Holland, which of course she won. And it says Beryl was the winner, etc., covering the 53 kilometres in an hour and 26 minutes. Well, 53 kilometres for a road race, it's just over 30 miles. And that was the distance that the women were riding then. I mean, now it's 85 miles. God knows what Beryl would have done with them over a distance like that. You know, plus the fact, of course, that she never had a chance at the Olympic Games or the Commonwealth Games. And also, there were no World Championship time trials. So who knows, you know, what she could have done if there'd been a World Championship time trial.
Beryl Burton was a cycling phenomenon, of the like we will probably never see again. A down-to-earth Yorkshire woman with a dry sense of humour, this working housewife never achieved the recognition or the rewards that her dedication and long cycling career deserved. But that was women's cycle racing as it was at the time. What she was her own person. She rode the races she thought she should and in the way she should. Her success came from her belief in herself, her own ability, a crushing desire to win, and a passion to never ever give less than her best. Beryl Burton did it because she could, and will forever remain an inspiration to cyclists everywhere.